So, welcome to 2021, everyone. I was struck by, I had an existential moment the other day when I was in the grocery store looking around, and everybody was just doing their business wearing a mask. And I was just, it just seemed so weird to me. And I was reminded of a play by Ionesco called Rhinoceros, where progressively all the inhabitants of the village turn into rhinoceroses. And the main character is left standing there thinking, it's strange how ordinary and normal this has become. Everybody's a rhinoceros, right? And that's what I was thinking. So CCTL retreat, this is fantastic. I'm so happy we were able to do this in this winter break. You know, when I accepted my job as associate provost, I had one very clear condition, and that was that I needed to continue to teach. So teaching is very much part of my identity, and that was nothing that I was going to give up. And all that worked really well, and I was able to balance that until March 2020. Now, as you know, teaching a foreign language requires a lot of one-on-one interaction between instructor and students, students to student. So going remote is not ideal, nor is teaching in person wearing a mask. So there were a lot of things that we had to figure out, obviously. And then going into the fall semester, we were down one adjunct in French, and I didn't think it was right to bring in a new person, a new part-time instructor in the midst of all that uncertainty. So I ended up teaching 4 courses in the fall. And I'm not saying that to make myself out to be a martyr at all, but 2 of those courses were in person, where I was wearing a clear plastic face mask that made me look like Hannibal Lecter. One course was completely online, and one course was high flex. So I felt like I got some experience with many different modules that we were all trying to learn. And this is coming from somebody whose sole use of Canvas to that point was the gradebook, and that only because I didn't need to use a calculator to figure out the final grades. So I'm very much looking forward to everybody's presentations and see what kind of dialogues and ideas are out there, and just to hear from everybody about how they managed in the fall and some of their ideas for going to spring. So those are my very brief comments. I made it even though I was late, made in time to finish before the program begins. So I will turn it back over to Rachel. Welcome everybody, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Henrik. Really appreciate you joining us this morning. Okay, our first thread, if you will, I had a break, but that's okay, that's over, was going to be suggestions for syllabi, and I'm going to turn it over to Erin Karper. Erin, do you want me to pull down the PowerPoint and make you a co-host?
That would be great, and then I can just share my PowerPoint, which will hopefully work this time.
Perfectly.
Okay.
And all you, man.
Any day now. Okay. Let's try that again. There we go. Can everyone see that? Okay, awesome. All right, so I am one of the co-chairs of the Academic Integrity Board, along with Chris Principe and Jim Kling once he's back from sabbatical. So if you have questions about statements for your syllabi, or if you encounter an academic integrity violation, please don't hesitate to email me, or if you want to talk on the phone, let me know and I'll send you my home number. So before we start, I'm going to be really quick, but I just want to go over the different terms that I'll use. So if I talk about academic integrity or AI, what we're talking about are the strategies that we use to avoid academic dishonesty. The academic integrity policy, the AIP, is the official cure for insomnia document that explains what a violation is, all the procedures we use, everybody's rights and responsibilities. So if I talk about the policy, that's what I'm talking about. You can download that from MyNU. It's very long just because it has a lot of things to cover. And then the Academic Integrity Board, or the AIB, is the group of students who help to refine the policy and also to participate in hearings. So those are usually appeal hearings or second violation hearings. So when we talk about violations, this is the whole list. Honestly, the two that we see the most reported are cheating and plagiarism. So there are a lot of different things that you could do that would constitute a violation. And if you're ever like, is this a violation or not, please let me know and I'll be happy to help you figure it out. But most of the time, faculty are dealing with addressing cheating or plagiarism. The other one that also comes up more and more is collusion, which is inappropriate collaboration. So they asked me to talk about putting a syllabus statement in your syllabus about the academic integrity policy. So before we look at some, I just want to talk about why that's important. So a lot of people will say, yeah, you know, in the syllabus template, there's that statement we all have to have. Why should I add on to that? Here's why. So if you report a student for committing a violation, they have the right to appeal. So very few students actually appeal. I think we had 9 appeals last fall out of like 43 violations. So not a lot of students appeal. But when they appeal, here's what the policy says. They can appeal saying they didn't do it. They have to prove that. They can appeal saying that the instructor said in their syllabus that they would impose these sanctions and they gave me a different sanction. Or they can appeal, and we've actually never seen this one, but it is in there just in case, that the instructor held a different student in the same course to a different standard and applied a different sanction. So the syllabus statement helps you both in all 3 cases, but really in number 2. So if you don't have sanctions listed, yeah, it is harder for a student to appeal, but what we do as part of an appeal hearing is that we look at what you said in your syllabus. Like, okay, they said they were going to do these things. Did they do them or not? So in the appeal process, then, one of the documents we'll look at is your syllabus and like, what did you say? What were your guidelines? What sanctions did you say could happen versus what sanctions did you actually impose? So the more clear your syllabus is about what the possible consequences are for an academic integrity violation, honestly, the easier it makes our job in terms of evaluating this, but also in terms of helping the student to understand, like, hey, this was spelled out to you that this would happen. So the the academic integrity policy says all syllabi have to provide information about the policy and explain the sanctions. So you can do that however you want. So we have the mandatory statement in the syllabus template, but what we ask is that you add a kind of course-specific explanation to that statement. So some programs or courses with multiple sections have adopted common policies. So for example, the Writing 100 program that I teach in, we just adopted a common statement that we all put in our syllabi now. So what goes into an explanation? So the required statement is very long. You might be thinking, why do I have to add more to that? Honestly, since the students see this in every syllabus, very few of them are actually going to read it until they really need to. So a better thing is after this to just put kind of a shorter, more direct explanation. So what we ask is that you address these 3 things. So first of all, what constitutes an academic integrity violation in your course? So different courses and different fields have different expectations for appropriate academic behavior. especially when it comes to doing work collaboratively. Like some courses are very much, you do your own work, only your own work. Whereas other courses are, no, we do a lot of group work, we do a lot of collaboration. So making the distinction clear is really important to students because they might have 5 different classes with 5 different sets of expectations. And then what penalties or sanctions will you impose if a violation occurs? So in terms of what sanctions instructors can impose, you can impose anything from nothing to failing the course. Anything outside of that would have to be imposed by the AIB. So you can say, I'm not going to penalize you grade-wise, but I am going to file a report. You can say, I'm going to make you redo this. I'm going to give you a point deduction or a letter grade deduction. I'm going to fail you outright for the assignment. I'm going to fail you for the course. You know, we're not here to tell you what sanctions you should impose. We're just giving you the range of sanctions. So some instructors, including me, I say, okay, you know, depending how severe this is, you'll either get a failure for the assignment or a failure for the course. Some people say, okay, any violation, you fail the course. So that's not a super popular one. And certainly if you're going to do that, you would want to think about the impact that automatically failing a course might have on a student's overall academic success at the university, but it is certainly something that you can do if you feel that's the way you want to go. But just spell out, what are you going to do? And then what should students do if they have concerns? So if they're not sure what constitutes a violation, should they talk to you? Should they go to the Academic Success Center? Like, how can they avoid this if at all possible? So the other thing we're asking people to be more clear about is collaboration versus collusion. And that's become a really big issue since spring 2020. So students often assume that they can work collaboratively unless they're told otherwise. And I'm not talking about like, let's get together and do the homework and have a study group over Zoom. I'm talking like, let's just swap answers kind of work on exams, which is obviously problematic unless you are giving a group exam. So unsanctioned collaboration, so collaboration that should not be happening, we call that collusion. So students really need to know, and I'm sure you are probably thinking, how can they not know this? They don't, or they claim that they don't, in which case we can say, oh no, in the syllabus, the instructor clearly explained what this is. So what kinds of collaboration in your class are acceptable? So again, we're not trying to dictate to you how to run your class. If you do a class where everybody works collaboratively and that's how it works, awesome. Just make that clear. On the other hand, if you're like, no, you need to do your own work in this course, and you know, collaboration should be limited to like study groups or working with a tutor, please spell that out. That's all we're asking for. So please explain the difference between collaboration and collusion. So I have a couple statements. I'm not going to read them in detail. I will upload a PDF to the chat of my PowerPoint slides so you can see them, especially if you want to borrow them. So this is from my business communication course. So I just spell out what an academic integrity violation is in the course. And I'm super wordy, so it's like 3 slides. So again, I'm not going to read it, but I explain this is what constitutes a violation. And then at the end of my statement, I say, okay, I will file a violation report. I'll either give you an F for the assignment or an F for the course. So, you know, I'm just doing those 3 things. Here's what a violation is. Here's how you would be penalized. I wrote this one before collusion became a big issue, so I do need to go back and revise it to make that more clear. Here is the rating 100 common policy, which again spells out what the most common violation is in the course. It's plagiarism. We don't really have a lot of cheating in writing 100. What students can do, you know, and what the penalties will be, which is the first time you'll fail the assignment, the second time you'll fail the course. So, you know, they don't have to be super long. They just need to spell out those things. And then here is one from someone in math who generously shared it with me. And she really explicitly spells out what collusion versus collaboration is. So, here is what I mean when I say do your own work. Here is how you should be interacting with tutors. And then, on each type of work in the class, here are my expectations for appropriate academic behavior. So, those are just some examples. Obviously, your statement is going to be specific to your course. So, whatever you feel should go in there should. I know you're thinking my syllabus is already long enough as it is. I get that, but having these expectations clear for students from the get-go is really important, so that if you do end up with a student who's violated the policy, they can't be like, oh, I didn't know that was a violation. The other thing is, on assignments, please remind students about the expectations on assignments, exam instructions. You can tell students to look at the policy in the syllabus. You can quote parts of your policy. Similarly, ask students to affirm, if you're giving an exam online, that they're upholding academic integrity standards. Another instructor actually gave me an interesting idea, which is she said that she has a 0-point question where if students feel that they couldn't affirm that, they can explain why. They can say, well, I had this thing happen during the exam, or I think my answer might look similar to this person's because. Not that that necessarily gets them out of a violation report, but she does give them a chance to be honest with her on the exam itself. So not that you have to do that, but I thought that was an interesting idea worth sharing. So remind students about these expectations. I know sometimes it feels ridiculous. This feels like something they should already know. And I really do think most of them do, but the more you say it, the more we close that loophole of, oh, I didn't know we could collaborate on this. We couldn't collaborate on this. Okay, so if you have questions, here is my email and Chris's email. That's really the best way to reach me, but if you want to have a meeting in some other format, I am happy to do that. So I will stop sharing my screen and put that link in the chat and then see if people have questions.
Erin, that was terrific, and I think in the end, the takeaway is the more clear you are in the syllabus, the more protected you are against students kind of accusing you of not being clear, right? So
Yeah.
It's not just for the students; it's really, it helps you out as well.
Yeah.
Erin, have there been increased numbers of violation reports since March?
We had a real spike in spring 2020. There was what I can only describe as a collusion ring happening. And that was unfortunate, where students in 2 separate classes were, first of all, meeting during lockdown outside of their bubble in person, but second of all, basically just producing all of their work collaboratively, even though it was supposed to be done individually. So I'll talk about this more in the afternoon, but fall 2020 was actually pretty similar to fall 2019. So things seem to have settled down, but the cases we do see coming through, some of them are kind of, well, I didn't know we weren't supposed to do that, or, people kind of trying to push the boundaries, because they have the opportunity to online.
The other question I had was with, I noticed that when something is failed, that you give 0 points, but I noticed it was points, not percentage. I do all my courses on percentage, and as I've wrestled with this over the years, I've kind of settled on 50 being what an F is as I graded. So I just wonder if you wanted to comment on the pluses and minuses of a 0 versus a 50.
I think that's up to individual discretion. For me, I use points, so 0 points tends to have more of an impact on their grade. If I feel like a grade reduction is called for, I might do that. The only thing we ask is that you be consistent. So if you're going to say, I'm going to give you an automatic 50% if you plagiarize, that's fine, as long as you spell it out. Or if I'm like, I want to give you 0 points because this isn't your work, so you shouldn't get any benefit from it, that's fine. We just have to be clear and be consistent.
Thanks.
I had a question. Oh, no, Stefanie, you go first.
Oh, thanks so much, Erin, for that overview, and for me particularly the discussion of collusion versus collaboration, because that's something I've really struggled with, especially, if you have a case of collusion, there's the person who gets the paper, but then there's also the person who gives the paper, right? Who shares the information. And I just would be really interested to know how you deal with that, or how, other suggestions on, because you do, in that case, it's difficult because you have multiple people who are involved.
What most instructors tend to do is they tend to report everyone involved. And then what happens is that usually the students will start coming forward and the story kind of settles out. So sometimes there's what I call sort of unintended collusion, where someone will take a paper from the student, or I don't know why they keep falling for this, but someone will be like, hey man, can I just see your essay? I just want to know like what one looks like. I'm not going to copy it, don't worry. And they're like, oh, okay, and then of course they just take the person's name off and turn it in. And then the instructor gets 2 copies of the same essay and they report both of them. So sometimes students genuinely believe, okay, the person's just going to look at this. They're not going to take my work. I'm helping them. And in that case, I tend to be a little less harsh about, about that. Most instructors are like, okay, you're more sinned against than sinning here. But other times it really is like, oh no, one person wrote this and then they shared it around and everybody put that paragraph in their lab report. So I think to me, dealing with collusion is trying to figure out what level of responsibility does each party have? Some instructors say, nope, if there's collusion, I'm just going to penalize everybody equally. But I find sometimes it's useful to dig in a little more and see like what's going on there. And that's how we uncovered that really big 18 violation collusion issue in the spring. So I appreciate it when instructors are willing to look into kind of what's going on under the surface.
Can I just add a follow-up question to that? Do you suggest that, instructors in that kind of a situation, should we try to do the digging first, or is it better to just report it and let the AIB do the digging?
I would report it because usually when students see that violation report, they suddenly take it very seriously.
Okay.
And if you want to retract a violation report, you can do that. Like I've had instructors say, you know what? I filed these reports. I've talked to all the students. This one student is really not responsible. I want to pull that violation for him or her. And we can do that. So I would file first because that really makes students take it seriously when they see that violation notice.
Thanks.
I just wanted to ask really quick, and I may have missed it because I had to refill my coffee. Is there a place besides the syllabus that maybe like a student expectation document that you could outline a lot more of the stuff in a little bit more detail that then you could provide to students instead of, just having this really, really long document? Or would you recommend definitely being in the syllabus?
I would definitely put it in the syllabus because the syllabus is also the thing that represents the course in record keeping. So like your dean has a copy of it, your department chair has a copy of it. So it really needs to be in there for record keeping. I do a visual version of my syllabus where I elaborate on things and I put that on Canvas for students. But yeah, the more you remind students about this, the better, just reinforcing like, hey, on this assignment, this is these are the expectations for appropriate academic behavior, because a lot of students genuinely say like, I didn't know you couldn't do this, or we always did it this way in high school. So I don't know how truthful that is, but a lot of them genuinely seem to believe it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Virginia, I believe, Erin, and correct me if I am not remembering correctly, but I think Jim Kling made up a kind of a cheat sheet summary document on AIB and the policies and different things
Yeah.
that I have copies of, and we could distribute those as well,
Yeah.
if that's helpful.
I think I found some of that on the NU website.
Yeah, yeah, it was like a sheet that, you know, people could put up on their wall, you know, it's a quick reference.
Right, thank you very much, Erin. She's kind enough to come back for us for the afternoon session as well. So thank you, I really appreciate your willingness. I like Virginia's hands clapping. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Rita, who's joining us from the Rochester Institute of Technology. And she is going, let me hang on. Rita, I'm going to find you and make you a co-host in case you have any slides to share. I can't do two things at once, talking. Turn things on. So if you do have any slides to pull them up, I'll let you introduce yourself. But next up is Rita. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have slides and I'm going to try and get through them a bit quicker because I could talk about this for hours and I know that we don't have that time and I want to have some time for you to ask questions if you have them. But yes, my name is Rita. I started at RIT as a postdoc and I'm now program coordinator for the Inclusive Excellence program in the College of Science. My background is in forestry and fire ecology. And now I'm doing a lot of inclusion work. So it's kind of I'm all over the place when it comes to my background, which is really fun. And I'm originally from Portugal. So if there's anything that you don't understand, please interrupt me and let me know. I know I have pretty good English, but still I'm more than open to having that happen. So give me a minute while I choose the right screen to share. And hopefully you can see a very green screen. All right. So I really appreciate your invitation to have me come and talk to you about something that I'm really strongly in favor of. And I know we've been talking about syllabi already, so that's great. So what I want to do, and let's see if I can, there we go. We'll just quickly go through what the structure and the function of a syllabus is and how we can then use a syllabus as an inclusion tool in your class. And as I'm going to go through it, I'm going to talk to you about what the inclusion elements are and how you can incorporate them in your syllabus. So, you know, main thing is what do you use your syllabus for? And different people use it for different reasons. So you can see the syllabus as a contract where you communicate a lot of information about the course. It's not really a great word to use because this is not officially a legal document. So as much as you want to believe that this holds the students to a certain standard, it's still not a contractual contract. So don't necessarily think of it that way. It is often a departmental requirement, which might make you not really feel very connected to this document either. But it is ultimately the introduction to your course, to you as an instructor. So it could also be seen as a representation of a teaching philosophy. So keep that in mind. A lot of what you communicate is supposedly who you are as a teacher. So that's a way of seeing the syllabus. And of course, as was mentioned a minute ago, it is a record for you, for your students, for your department, for whoever has access to that document. So there are not a lot of studies on syllabi, and especially focusing only on STEM faculty. So what I decided to do was take those studies and then take some syllabi from the College of Science and apply a little bit of analysis to see what comes up when you look at common elements of the syllabus. And that's not, it wasn't very different from what I found with just the generic studies that I saw. The majority of things included are personal information, course basics, course description or purpose, what your textbook is going to be like, some information about grading, some information about the assignments, often only the name of the assignment. And of course, the most common policy that shows up is academic conduct. Again, all tying in. Less frequently included, however, are things like how to use technology in your class, and welcoming statement of some sort, strategies for success, discussion guidelines if you have discussions in your class, accommodations, student support services, religious, cultural observances, a table of contents if the syllabus is long enough, visuals, and the use of pronouns. So when it comes to inclusion, thinking about what is the message that you're conveying to your students is really important. And that is done through a variety of elements that I'm going to go through. And these are things that are already in your syllabus, I'm sure. Some might be just something that you tweak. Others might be something that you end up adding. But ultimately, there's not a lot of huge transformations you need to do to make your syllabus a bit more inclusive. Let's go forward, not backward. So the first one I want to talk about is tone. And this is kind of a big umbrella of things. Obviously, to me, it immediately goes to language, and I'm going to show an example of that in a minute. In the meantime, I wanted to talk about other elements that you add that really change how this is shown to your students. Ultimately, the purpose of these inclusive elements is to communicate to your students that you care about their success and also that you care about them as individuals. So having a welcome statement, having clear expectations for them and for yourself as well, communicated to the students, giving them strategies for success because you know what those are. You've taught before, you probably taught your course a lot. And so you know how to get them to be successful. But I also would put the caveat of success should also be defined by your students and it shouldn't be grade-based. And obviously, again, if you have discussion in your class, having guidelines of how you want that to happen is really important. When I mean tone, often we're talking about subtle ways that we can address language to your students. The most basic is don't use student and instructor, use I and you. The other is, as you can see from this example, and I'm going to read the class participation because it's short. It's very subtle, the differences between these two statements. The first one that's more contractual says, come prepared to actively participate in this course. This is the best way to engage you in learning the material, and it makes the lectures more interesting. Nothing particularly wrong with how it's written, but if you just adjust it slightly to, I hope you actively participate in this course. I say this because I found it to be the best way to engage you in learning the material, and it makes the lectures more fun. So again, incredibly subtle differences in these two statements, but the second one conveys more of I care about you, and this is why I'm doing this and why it's better for you. And that's ultimately what we would want to communicate with all sections of your syllabus. Now, the course structure is often a difficult thing to adapt. It depends on how much flexibility you do have with it, and I know some people don't. So take that with a grain of salt. All of these modifications that I'm talking about, you do them only to the extent that you're capable of doing them, obviously. So if you do have the ability to introduce a bit of flexibility to your course design, it is really important because things happen. They can happen to you, they can happen to your students. You know, we've had a whole year of everything happening and really, you know, forcing you to be flexible. So it's really something that allows for you to also communicate that, you know, you understand everybody is human and you are more focused on their learning and success than on keeping track with the schedule. The other thing in your course structure that can really be important for the students is when you align your activities and your objectives. We always have learning objectives, and then you have your assessments and other activities, but sometimes there's no connection between the two. So just being clear about the assessments and how they are going to connect with the learning objectives allows for the students to make the connection themselves. And they're more likely to buy in to the assessments instead of just seeing them as a huge workload. When talking about assessments, you might want to consider how you're assessing your students. So, bless you. Having multiple opportunities for the students to demonstrate knowledge is really important. Instead of, say, have 2 exams that are worth 50% each of their grade, consider when those assessments are due. Don't put major assessments after a break. A break should be a break for everyone and an opportunity to catch up on work and study for a big thing. And the last few weeks of class, especially the last week and a half, everybody is putting all their major assignments right before exams. So if you have, again, that flexibility to when you're scheduling these things, think about that and think about the load that the students are under. Now, with the formative assessments, there's also this you know, typically we do tests, we do homework, maybe a few things here and there. What else can you do? Students can be very creative and they have different ways of exposing to you what they know. Often that doesn't come in the form of a multiple choice exam. So by having a variety of formative assessments, what you're doing is allowing for those students that may not be as traditional in showing how they know and how they've learned, you give them the opportunity to do so and be successful. And again, I mentioned this, have a description of your assignment to get the students to really understand what the assignment is about. Obviously, the syllabus is not static. You don't do the same syllabus for a first year course that you do for a fourth year. Students in the second year need a lot more guidance in what it is like to be in college than students later on in their career. So also consider things that you probably don't need to do anymore if you're teaching third, fourth, and other levels of instruction. Accommodation, you probably have some sort of statement. There's an official statement from the university and all of that. But I would also suggest that whenever you have a statement from the university, put the link to it and add a little statement of your own, because that makes it a lot more personal. You're still giving them access to what the official policy is, and you can summarize it very quickly, but in your own words, which makes it a huge difference than the legalese of all these statements that are coming from the university. Add the student support services. This could be very simply what they are and a contact information or a location, but it's communicated to the students that being successful means you take advantage of everything that's available to you, academic and non-academic. And often they don't know that these things exist or that they should be using them. The last thing I would say about accommodation is thinking about religious and cultural observances. We tend to have a calendar that revolves around the dominant culture and religion, but a lot of our students don't fit that mold. So just having a little statement that says something along the lines of, you know, if they come to see you early enough to discuss any type of accommodation they might need, you can have a conversation, right? You can maybe be able to accommodate any need for the students to maybe miss class or even miss an assignment, depending on when it falls. And so this is not to say that you will for sure do it. It's just to say you're open to it, but the students have the responsibility to come to you and talk to them. But you're opening the conversation, which is really important. Finally, when it comes to accessibility, there are different layers that you can have. The accessible format of the actual documents. There's a lot of literature on font type, font size, formatting, the actual justification of a text, contrasting of image, etc. So be attentive to that, because students with learning differences may have a lot of trouble reading the things that you write. Making them accessible just in general. So consider that some students might have difficulty in your class if you're giving them an assignment for them to write on, and some of them might need to have it on a computer and it's easier for them to type. So consider having always that as an option for students. When it comes to, again, accessibility of your information in a syllabus, I'm going to say it right now, longer is better. But if it's going to be a long document, you need to have a table of contents and a clickable table of contents, which is super easy to create on Word, and allows students to immediately go to sections that they need. They don't have to kind of scavenger hunt for information. And you can use the syllabus as more of a living document of usage instead of a one and done at the beginning of the semester. Lastly, include visuals wherever you can. If you're comfortable, put a picture of yourself. Picture of your textbook, a picture that represents what you're teaching. Those elements kind of give more dimension to your syllabus and allow for them to connect the information more clearly. For instance, when you have the percentage points that every assignment is worth, consider adding a pie chart. It's the perfect use of a pie chart. And even small things like a 5% assignment or a 10% that usually tend to be the stepchildren of assignments when it comes to students, when they see them as part of a whole, it makes a huge difference on how much they will then consider them important for their grade. So I'm going to go a little bit fast on here because I know that we don't have a lot of time. This is basically a summary of the things I've said. So when it comes to creating an inclusive syllabus, what are specific things you can do? So I've kind of talked about this already a little bit. So, you know, use positive and warm language, including a welcome statement or teaching philosophy, include strategies for success, but also common pitfalls, because those can be as informative. Use self-disclosure as much as you're comfortable with, meaning connect with your students by telling them personal information about you. And by personal, I mean, it could be how you got to be where you are. What is it? What interested you in teaching or in the discipline that you're in? Again, do only as much as you are comfortable doing, but this creates a connection to your students. And another part of that is, if this is your personality, which is not everybody's, and that's perfectly fine, use humor as much as you're comfortable using. And again, these all fall into that category of tone that I mentioned at the beginning. Connect your assignments to your goals and objectives. Have sort of description of them. And if you have rubrics, include them as well. Add campus resources, both academic and non-academic. Use images as much as possible. Again, write a longer, more detailed syllabus. It's been shown to produce higher ratings of teacher effectiveness, and students have a more positive impression of you and the course when the syllabus is a little bit longer. But again, it's longer because it's detailed. It's giving them information they need. It's also been shown that students at the beginning of their academic career don't really understand office hours as much, and it might be a reason why they don't show up to office hour. So one thing that you can do to change that is you can call them student hour, for instance, but also just put a statement at the end of that first block of information where you have office hours and all your personal information. So just say, come and see me. I look forward to seeing you in my office. Let them know, normalize that this is something that people do. Just come in and see me. It often does get more students to show up at your door. Add your pronouns to your syllabus. This is really crucial for students that are non-binary. It communicates to them that you understand, that you see them. You're not asking anybody to out themselves. So it's a very small thing to do if you're comfortable doing it, and it communicates kudos to them. And then ultimately ask them, how do they use your syllabus and how do they view your syllabus? Because often we don't do that enough. And it kind of will tell you what do you need to do to communicate to them the use of the syllabus. So to get them to engage with the syllabus, the first thing I want you to ask yourselves is, how do you engage your students with your syllabus? Is it a first day summary of, you all got this is the main things you're going to find, and you never touch it again? Do you ask them to read before coming to class? Now, this is important because we often have that students don't read, they come unprepared for the class in terms of asking you throughout the semester information that you just say it's in the syllabus. But often that has to do with how you engage them with the syllabus. Do it throughout the semester. Make it part of the class of, oh, let's go to the syllabus and see when this is due, or let's go to the syllabus and refresh ourselves about this policy or something, that gets them used to going to the syllabus often, instead of just thinking, oh, I'm gonna stuff this in my backpack and never look at it again. Nowadays, we don't even have to print them, which is great for the environment. You can use the syllabus also as, a lot of people put them throughout their learning management systems, and they're great, but it's also nice to just have one document where everything is collated. The other thing I would say is use activities in the first, second day of class. It's a great way to get them to engage with themselves, get to know each other, engage with you. There's a bunch of exercises you can do with syllabi, like doing a jigsaw, an expectations exercise, an alignment chart, quizzes, you name it. I have a handout and I'm going to put it on the chat so that I don't go through all of this in detail. You can just look at it and you can make something up yourself, because, teachers are very creative. But, I just wanted to leave it at that. I appreciate you inviting me. This is my contact information. And of course, obviously, you have it too. So I'm going to stop sharing right now so that I can actually add that to the chat. And then if you have any questions, if we have time, I'll be happy to take them.
Hi, Rita.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Ed Hutton. I teach finance, and many of my students are graduate students who are foreign students. And so they may have, in some situations, they may be sitting in my class and they would have just gotten to the United States the week before.
Oh.
And so can you give some tips about a syllabus that, that would work for somebody who's just coming into the United States? Because what I find a lot is that, depending on where they're coming from, their courses may have been taught very, very differently, overseas, and now they're in the United States here. And I kind of feel like if I'm, they're not expecting the professor to be chatty and, that sort of thing and engaging. It's really very, very different. Can you talk about that?
So as an international student, I can also tell you that it's not just a culture shock. I was fortunate to be a TA, so I had a 3-week stint before I even had classes where I had an introduction to American culture in school, and that was very different from what Europe is like, and was beneficial in that sense. But what I found out, especially as a grad student in being the first grad student in my lab, was that there's all this other things that are happening to a grad student, whether or not they're a TA, that their advisor might not know about. So I actually created a document for my advisor when I left of things that you need to communicate before even the student probably comes from abroad. So I think that that's something that you can do. Again, I think that there's the notion of lengthening the syllabus can seem a little bit frightening, but what you can also do is if you have separate documents, you can link them in there, and therefore you don't have a gigantic document, but all the information is there. So what I would say is, depending on the size of your syllabus as is, and for a grad student, there's a lot of things that you don't no longer seem to have to tell them, but you often have to treat international student as kind of a first-year student, because what we fail to recognize is the hidden curriculum for first and second years, but that is also hidden from international students more so than ever. So what you can do is create maybe even a separate document that you link there that is kind of like introduction to American culture in American universities, to explain that relationship of being able to not feel more foreign than ever in a class, but also thinking not to be patronizing, because obviously grad student is older, but thinking about what is about the hidden curriculum that they also need to know, that a first-year student would need to know. And I would say, especially the non-academic resources are really important. The writing center is crucial, because we're thinking and writing and taking exams and doing everything in a foreign language for a lot of people. So it's no shame to say you might need some help. Grad students often have a lot of problems with their mental health after a while. So normalizing that and knowing what the pathway for them is. I didn't know that in my college, I had 6 free sessions of therapy. That was something that was never communicated to me. So all of those, not only linking them to the resources, but also maybe giving them a little bit more information of why they should be going to these, using these resources when they need, that's part of being successful, that's not a weird thing, especially again with the mental health aspect. They're all going to suffer with it, but some cultures are a lot less open to those types of resources than others. So I would definitely have, and if obviously you already have students that are international and experienced being in the US for a while, I would also ask them to help you draft that information. There's a lot more buy-in. They were probably going to tell you things that you hadn't thought about. So gather their feedback, because that's going to be easier for you. It's going to be important for them, and it's going to be more enriching for the new students coming in.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. That was tremendous.
And again, I think that the handout is fine. It said it shared successfully. So again, you have a lot of this information there. You have my rubric for how to look at a syllabus and determine whether or not what are elements that are inclusive and how to make it more inclusive, and how long it takes, because I understand that some things are easier to implement than others. So again, anything else that you might need, I know this is kind of like a really short
Sorry.
went through. I'm more than happy to discuss at a different time.
Thank you. We really appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good luck with your conference.
All right. Next, I'm going to call up Jamie and Stefanie, who are on the academic task force and have been creating some awesome syllabus statements for us. Do you want me to make you both co-hosts? Sure. Okay.
So should I go ahead and start sharing the PowerPoint?
I don't know if you'll be able to quite yet.
Oh, okay.
Now you should be good.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start us off here. Thanks so much, Rachel and the CCTL committee for organizing this. It's just nice to start thinking about some of these things, right, as we look ahead to spring. And what Jamie and I want to share, we haven't quite gotten to the point of having syllabus language drafted, but just thinking about our experiences from the fall, right, and draw on our discussion from the academic task force, also with other faculty, the issues we experienced and that we've seen, and also some ideas on addressing them, and then hopefully a chance at the end to hear from you things that we might want to think about addressing as we prepare for the semester. So I have up here, this is kind of a big question that I've been thinking about a lot in trying to debrief the experience from the fall. So how can we avoid decision fatigue, right? Just this endless having to make these small decisions about, students in quarantine and if somebody needs to be remote and make up assignments and things like that, by anticipating potential classroom management issues as we develop our spring syllabi, drawing on what we learned from our experience this fall. So we have a slide with some brainstorming questions. And I think, just taking a few minutes to think about this as we prepare for spring, right, might be helpful to identify the things that we want to focus on. So the first one, right, what are the classroom management issues that stressed me out the most or absorbed the most time this past semester? And I think we, probably I'll do this on a regular basis as we prepare for a semester, but fall certainly provided so many different challenges and issues that maybe were unanticipated, right? So first of all, just identifying for ourselves what those really problematic situations were is a good start. And then thinking about what on our syllabi worked well this fall. So, I mean, for me, there were some things where I thought, I did a good job anticipating how it was going to deal with those situations. And then there were other situations where I got it completely wrong, right, on my syllabus. So which ones didn't work? And then also, if I could address one challenge that I faced this fall, what would it be? And then can I make changes to my syllabi this spring that would help me to address this challenge? And I think this is a really good place to put some time. And writing syllabus policies is not particularly fun. And I often find, at the beginning of the semester when I'm going over them with my students, I feel like I'm one of those pharmaceutical ads on television, right? Where with all the little fine print at the bottom of the screen that you go through very quickly. And, it's so it's hard to kind of get away with that. But if we think about what a syllabus policy is really trying to do, right? Provide a clear, transparent explanation of how we're going to address situations that arise so that our students are clear on our expectations. And the benefit of this is it allows us to focus on the teaching, right? And minimize the time we're spending developing responses to crises. So how can we then do this, especially in this COVID moment where we have this additional challenge of having to have maximum flexibility to deal with changing circumstances? So we have a list here. This is a list that Jamie and I put together, completely unofficial list of 4 classroom management issues that we both faced. And in talking to many of our colleagues, the things that people seem to have brought up most frequently as challenges. So the first one is the question of attendance, right? So for both in-person classes, for remote classes, the holding students accountable and encouraging attendance and participation, right? At the same time as we were dealing with quarantine situations and all of that. And we know how important this is, right, for student retention and student success. The next one is the challenge of assignments and assignment submission. So in-person tests provided a particular challenge, right? If a student is sick or in quarantine, right? How do you provide those accommodations without compromising the integrity of a test? The question of students in quarantine, assuming that that meant that they were excused from work for a period of time, the requests for extensions. So I think the assignment question was an important one. The request to change delivery format. So we had both experienced students partway through the semester in our in-person classes asking to go fully online for the rest of the class. So, you know, thinking ahead about how we might, you know, prepare to address that question. And then finally, the question of online etiquette for remote teaching. So students with persistent technical problems, showing up to class late, distractions, inappropriate backgrounds, all of those kinds of things. So we're not going to address that one so much here, but we do have some good documents from the Senate Online Task Force that were sent out at the beginning of the fall that we can share again. And also Melissa Langridge in the library put together some really wonderful documents, guidelines for students on how to navigate the various platforms that we use that address some of these etiquette questions. So I will turn this over to Jamie now.
Oops, sorry, thank you, Stefanie. So one of our, I'm going to address two challenges, the attendance issue and assignment completion while students are on quarantine or out for some reason. So one of our goals in bringing, it was myself, Stefanie and Anna McNabb, who had brought these issues to the academic task force. And our goal really was to try to develop some common language on the status of students in terms of attendance and participation in light of COVID. And this is still a work in progress, but we met this morning and we met, in fact, with Adrienne Kasbaum, who's the Director of Health Services. And so she's in on these conversations and is really open to kind of integrating this language into how her office is communicating with students as well. And so we developed three kinds of categories that we thought might be useful for people in communicating with students, in particular, what our expectations are while they're, maybe getting tested, and depending on how the test comes back, whether they're told that they need to go into quarantine. One of our main concerns was that the students who just kind of disappear, right? The students who just like stop coming to class, don't communicate with us, maybe send an email saying I need to quarantine, but it's we haven't received official word from the university. And so I know for myself, my attendance policy really kind of went out the window because I didn't know how to maintain an attendance policy when students were in I was getting different kinds of communications from the university. Maybe I wasn't getting communication from anyone, but a student would disappear. So it was just really hard to kind of regulate that for my class. So we came up with these categories, and Adrienne Kasbaum did say that she would add this language to, once it's finalized, add this language to student packets that students in quarantine receive when they go to the hotel, the quarantine hotel, or when they're sent home, so we could all kind of be on the same page across the university in terms of what our expectations are. So the first category is in-person attendance, and this is probably going to be sort of your standard attendance policy, but some questions we thought might be useful to think about. with this category is what is my attendance policy for students who are cleared to attend in class in person, or depending on what your delivery method is. And then what is my late assignment or missed exam policy for students who are cleared to attend in person. So just kind of having, right, that might be the case that you have 3 kinds of attendance policies within your syllabus. Remote participation. So this is when a student has demonstrated a documented need for remote learning for a specified period of time, as verified by the appropriate university office. So sometimes this might come from the health services, or it might come from the dean's office. The student is expected to attend and participate in class remotely in the manner outlined by the faculty member, and the student is expected to submit all assignments on time. So with each of these categories, we're, clearly the discretion of the actual attendance policy itself is up to the individual faculty member. But we just wanted some language to make it clear to students that if they're in quarantine and they're able to, that they can still participate in coursework and should be kind of following along and submitting material. Now, what that looks like for each of us might be different. And so that's individual decision. And so some questions that might be useful for thinking about, what does this look like? What does remote participation look like for my course? What are my expectations as far as how that student can demonstrate participation and engagement with the material? And so this needn't be a situation where you need to now offer a high flex situation, right, where students are participating remotely when you're on video camera or something like that. Is completely up to you. But if students usually submit coursework or complete exams in person, it's worth thinking about how will I accommodate students who have a documented reason for being unable to do so, right, to submit that work in person. And then the last category is unable to participate. So the student has presented documentation that indicates they will not be able to participate in class activities, including both in-person and remote attendance, as well as assignments for a clearly defined period of time or until further notice. This might include documented serious illness or documented family emergency, as verified by the appropriate university office. And we thought, probably a response to this situation would need to be developed on a case-by-case basis. If there is a transition between remote participation and unable to participate, Adrienne has indicated that there is a 24-hour nurse line available that she will share or has shared with students, where students can call and indicate that they are unable to participate. So they've kind of moved to that status. And along those lines of attendance and what will happen kind of during these periods of being unable to participate, it might be true too for the faculty member. And so thinking about faculty absence, if I need to teach remotely for a defined period of time, or unable to teach in any format for a defined period of time, how will I accommodate that in my teaching? So we really just kind of wanted to encourage people to think about what these different categories might look like. And also, again, I think just to reiterate that we're looking for a way to communicate with students what the expectations are at various stages of what they might be experiencing over the course of the semester. The next kind of issue that faculty reported having encountered, and my department saw this in particular in Writing 100 and English 110, which were requests from students to change the way they were participating in the course several weeks into the course. So maybe they enrolled in a hybrid course or other, or in fully in-person course, and then a few weeks later decided that they wanted to go fully remote for some reason. And this, of course, puts a lot of extra thinking work, kind of burden on the faculty member to figure out how to provide different delivery methods in a single class. And so we wanted to provide some support on the topic without dictating how this issue should be addressed, because again, we're all going to, respond to these situations differently. But if encountered and someone would like some language on how to respond to students who are looking to, requesting that a change be made mid-semester to the delivery format, you could use some of this language. So this course is intended to be taught fully or mostly in a face-to-face format, following all the established pandemic protocols. In the case of a family or medical emergency, I am prepared to make reasonable accommodations for those students to continue the coursework. However, I cannot entertain individual student requests to change the basic delivery format of the class. To request accommodations for my consideration, please email me and include the reason for which you are seeking accommodations. So we thought that might just be a kind of a fair way to handle. Again, it would be on a case-by-case basis. Providing the support for the faculty member to make the decision that if they don't feel they can offer both hybrid and fully online all in the same class in the same semester, that's okay. So those, and then we also suggested that defining the delivery format for students up front, maybe even in advance of the class starting, as we did in the fall semester. And the definitions we did provide in the fall semester, but I think we can probably send those out again. There was a template of, kind of clarifying, here's this course is going to be hybrid, meeting on these days. Here's what this means. Those definitions are also provided in the Senate Online Task Force best practices document that were also distributed in the fall, but I'm sure we can probably make those available again as well. So I'll turn it back over to Stefanie.
So just to wrap things up here, I'm going to post in the chat these brainstorm questions, just in case they're useful for you as you think about your planning for spring. And moving ahead on these issues, I think the more thought that we can give up front on how we might respond to these situations, the smoother things will be. And even if some of this information, it may not be things that we want to communicate to students up front, right? If we have our own kind of game plan about how we're going to deal with this, but the thought that we put in now, right, can help us deal with them in the moment. But also Jamie mentioned the class template. And so communicating some of this information to students even before the semester begins, I think could alleviate a lot of the questions at the very beginning of the semester, particularly about what we mean on individual class modality, right? And so the template has those definitions of hybrid and high flex and synchronous and asynchronous. And so a student might have looked at the course listings and they might see, okay, this class is hybrid, but they may not know which days are which, or they might not have actually clicked on the course to see that listing. So again, even communicating that ahead of the semester would be helpful. And one last thing, just with dealing with some of these hiccups as far as the online etiquette question, providing students with a low stakes trial run for some of the technology that you might be using in class is one way that you might be able to address that. So that's what we wanted to share. If anybody has any issues related to these things that you'd like us to take to the academic task force, a number of the members of that committee are here on this meeting, but feel free to put them in the chat or send us an email.
Thank you very much, Jamie and Stefanie. Do you guys have any questions for Jamie or Stefanie?
Henrik?
Yeah, hi. It's so great. The language is really helpful. And I just wanted to point out for clarification what Adrian clarified this morning, that they tell each student who goes into quarantine, they are very clear that they are expected to participate remotely in class, because I think there were a lot of students who thought, oh, I'm in quarantine, I don't need to show up for class or do any of the work. And they are told very, very specifically that unless they are very, very sick, they are expected to participate. And the vast majority of students, even those who test positive, did not get sick this fall. So that's, I think, important to just keep in mind as well as you prepare these.
Hey, Chris.
Thank you both for that. I had a question. Last semester, I had issues where a student would apparently break the university rules, whether it would be going to a party or I don't know what the circumstances was, but I would get these emails that they were not allowed to participate in class, almost like a high school suspension kind of thing, which honestly was very disruptive for me. So I was wondering if the academic task force has thought about that, like what are the rules? It seemed, by that point I was all remote because of the 50 or 60-minute rule from the county. So it seemed ridiculous to me that the student, couldn't participate in class because it was remote to begin with.
Actually, I think I can offer a little bit of clarification. I don't want to hijack the presentation.
No, please do.
Yeah, I had a long chat with Chris Sheffield and Jason about this last semester, and what you're talking about was called a provisional suspension, and that is if a student was caught, organizing a party, for example, and they would be suspended as a disciplinary measure for, I think it was just a maximum of 2 days until a hearing happened. And I never got a real firm answer on what that means, except that they should not be interacting with other students on campus. So the impression that I got was that if they can participate remotely, they can still do that. But again, that's what that came from. And it wasn't an extended period of time. And Chris was pretty sure that it might be a question of one class period or something, that it's only a 2-day maximum suspension if that's what it was.
That's helpful. They did not share that with me. And I think they had the impression they couldn't do anything, but maybe they might have been trying to get out of work or, doing work for the class or something. So
yeah, and I think the thing is, for them, it was a safety concern that if they were infected, for example, as a result of their actions, they need to be kept away, and also the disciplinary part. But I'll see if I can get some real firm language from Chris about that. But that's how I understood it from last semester.
Because I recall they were asking, can I get an extension on my homework? I'm not allowed to participate. So right. I think kind of on the theme of what we've been learning this morning, if there could be some guidance other than it's, the professor's decision kind of from the university, since it's a university sanction, kind of guidance language from you or your office.
Yeah.
So everyone's on the same page.
The way that I understand it, and again, I'll get confirmation, is that the only reason a student may not participate remotely in a class is if they're too sick to participate. Like that's the one reason. Any other reason, if they can participate remotely, they should.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking for some guidance this semester because it's the 60-minute rule clobbered me last semester too. So I switched to a 3-day format now so I can have 55-minute classes. So I'm hopeful again that I'm going to have a whole semester in, face-to-face classes, but that makes it more challenging now if, any students are in quarantine or isolation on how they make up a class. Because if we're online, then I record it and they can just, watch the recording and comment in the discussion section. So that's kind of nice. If it's a face-to-face class, how do I, I'm wondering how do I give them that opportunity to still be involved with class without having to put on, a webcam, in my classroom and record every face-to-face class that I teach. Or maybe I should be recording every face-to-face class, with my webcam. I don't know, any suggestions on that or guidance?
I don't have great ideas, but the way that because I teach face-to-face as well, I was doing hybrid this semester. On the days when students were missing from quarantine because of quarantine, I would send them after class the questions and conversation topics that we discussed, and they would have to write responses to the discussion questions that were covered in class. It's not ideal, and it's a lot of extra emailing. So, but I think going forward, I want to find a way to do that, not on a case-by-case basis, but kind of try to automate it a little more upfront. I don't care to be on video, frankly, and I don't care to have my class videoed. So that is a challenge, I think, for those of us who are doing the face-to-face and having to then cover the material again for students, right, who are missing. So anyway, so it doesn't probably help you very much what I'm saying, but I just thought I'd start the conversation. If someone has a better idea, please chime in.
I think it raises a really important question, and I was in person this fall as well, and I just set up a Zoom link, and I had a student who was fully remote, so I had it open for that student anyway. But I think one of the things we wanted to encourage everybody with is just that we really can all decide this on the basis of what we are comfortable with individually, right? And what makes the most sense in the context of our particular class, right? So just kind of spending some time thinking about the various scenarios and the pros and cons of each one can help alleviate some of the stress when the semester begins if students do end up in those situations.
This is Ed. What I did is, because I had the same thing. All of my classes, Paul, were 3-hour classes. They were all taught at night, and then with the 60-minute rule, really mess things up. But what I did for all of my classes last semester was, instead of video recording, what I did is I used Camtasia to record my screen, and then. So I had a microphone, so I could record the audio. I used Camtasia to record the screen, and then I converted those to MP4 files. And I did that for all my classes. And once you got into it, it wasn't that much work to do. So I didn't have to worry about video at all, or trying to have a video camera focused on the slides and that sort of thing. And then actually using with my computer, I can draw on my computer screen, and I recorded that on Camtasia. And so that actually worked pretty well. I recorded all those and posted those. So it's a bunch more work, but it did work okay.
That's while you were remote, not while you were face to face.
No, while I was face to face.
Oh.
Yeah, no, while I was face to face, I basically, when I go into the classroom, I connect my laptop to the instructor's workstation, and then I start Camtasia on my laptop, and then I record the class and my voice in Camtasia. And then after I'm done in Camtasia, after the class, I would convert that to an MP4 file, which makes it much, much smaller, 200 megabytes, 250 megabytes, and then post it to the Canvas. So that so I actually had, as I was talking before, I have a lot of international students, and they said, oh, you do this all the time. I really like this because I don't get everything the first time in class, and I really like listening to it over again.
What was the microphone that you used? Sorry, Stefanie.
What's that?
What was the microphone that you used?
I used a Blue Snowball, and it's fabulous. It costs about $70. It looks like a big ball. You know, I have another microphone here, but when I was in class, I would use the blue snowball. And with that microphone, I found it would pick up all the student questions from the live. So I would have students who would be in class asking questions, and it perfectly recorded there. So it's not an expensive technology, and with Camtasia, which is a separate program you have to buy, I found it worked really well. I recorded, like I said, I taught 4 classes and I did them all in that format last semester.
So Rachel, I see we're way over our time. Are these the kinds of questions and suggestions you'd like us to put in that link that you just put in the chat?
That would be awesome if you wouldn't mind. We are going to have open discussion. It was originally starting at like 11:50, and so, or 11:50 into 12. So I'll just push that back a little bit. But yeah, these are great ideas. So if you wouldn't mind throwing them on the Nearpod, it looks like a little bulletin board, just so everyone can kind of see and like them and comment. So thank you.
Yeah, that way we can actually like have the names of these different things that Ed's mentioning, so that we can, have them written down and look them up and things like that. That'd be great.
Thank you. I was going to give us a little bit of a break here before we shifted gears into the next set of presentations. I imagine everybody needs to maybe stretch their legs and refill their coffee. Do you want to take about 10 minutes and we'll pick this back up around 11:25-ish? Does that work? Okay, very short break. I'll adjust the schedule. Thank you guys.